Здравейте, уважаеми зрители! Вие сте с предаването конкретно YouTube канала на Поглед.инфо. Аз съм Георги Стамболиев. Уважаеми зрители, част от събитията, на които ние сме свидетели, а и участници днес, имат своя генезис доста преди днешния ден. За подобни причинно-следствени връзки ще говорим днес с господин Пол Крейг Робъртс. Знаете, той е човек, който от време на време оказва честта да бъде наш гост. Той се намира в Щатите. Само за публиката, която по-рядко има възможност да го слуша, нека припомня, че той е бил заместник финансов министър по времето на Рейган, на управлението на Рейган. Той е човек, който целият си живот е прекарал в американската администрация, познавайки голяма част от политиките, които са имали за цел да бъдат реализирани или ли са се реализирали в някакъв момент. Поради тази причина днес ще започнем с една доктрина. Доктрината, която се нарича Wolfowitz, но за това ще говорим веднага след като мине заставката в началото. Уважаеми зрители, на 3 юни от 19 часа заповядайте тук на живо в студиото на Поглед. Гост ще ни бъде професор Дарина Григорова. Оказа се, до момента не съм правил интервю с нея, но темите са ясни. Православието, славянството, историята, Русия и всичко това в контекста на днешните събития или по-точно на събитията от последните 4-5 години. Така че заповядайте на 3 юни от 19 часа. Билети може да си купите в ePayGo или на място преди началото на събитието. Mr. Roberts, hello and thank you very much for having you today.
I'm pleased to speak to you again.
I want to start with a quote from one of your articles. The quote is, neither Russia nor Iran seems to understand that they are confronted with hegemonic agendas. How exactly do you negotiate with powers whose intention is to end your sovereignty? Peace requires Washington to reunize the Wolfowitz doctrine and Israel to renounce Greater Israel. This is something that you have wrote a few days ago, and I'm very interested in what exactly is the doctrine Wolfowitz?
Paul Wolfowitz was a Undersecretary of Defense who created a new American foreign policy when the Soviet Union collapsed. The Soviet Union's collapse, Wolfowitz reasoned, meant there was no longer any obstacle to America's hegemony over the world. That it was now a unipolar world. The only power was the United States, and therefore the United States could exercise unilateralism and hegemony over all other countries. So this doctrine is still the American foreign policy. No administration has repudiated. The Congress has not ruled against it. And for the Israelis, their doctrine of hegemony is not for the whole world, it's for the Middle East. And their doctrine of Greater Israel is that the entirety of the Middle East belongs to Israel. Originally, Greater Israel was defined from the Nile, which is the river in Egypt, to the Euphrates, which is the river in Iraq that splits Iraq in half. So all of that territory, which would include Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, half of Iraq, all of this was Greater Israel. But within the last year, there have been two modifications by the Israelis to their definition of the territory that belongs to Israel. The first was an Israeli government minister announced that Great Israel was now from the Nile through half of Saudi Arabia. So it now included half of Saudi Arabia. And then more recently, one of Netanyahu's ministers held up a new map and said that Greater Israel is from the Nile to Pakistan. So this kind of claim means there cannot be any peace in the Middle East as long as Israel has this doctrine, because it means they see themselves as entitled to land that currently constitutes other countries. And the American doctrine of hegemony is the reason for the conflicts with Russia, and the reason for what would be a conflict with China, except the Chinese government simply doesn't acknowledge the conflict.
Yeah.
So these constraints are not acknowledged in any of the foreign policy discussions. The solutions they come up with, the peace talks and so on, they never mention these two doctrines of hegemony. And therefore, all the discussions are pointless, meaningless. All of the peace negotiations are pointless because they do not acknowledge the two fundamental issues.
From governmental point of view, from administration point of view, or whatever it is, how is possible to end one of those doctrines, for example, in the United States? Is it, what are the tools to say that this doctrine is no longer on the list, it's no longer available, we need to change it? How this is happening? Is it possible?
I don't think it could happen unless the United States suffers a substantial defeat. For example, the United States started the conflict in Ukraine. It was a way to destabilize Russia or Putin's government. And Putin, failing to realize that, did not respond in any effective way. And so this has encouraged Washington to think that it can do whatever it wants and Putin will never do anything. Similarly, the Chinese leadership always avoids confrontation. And so this has encouraged Washington that they can do whatever they want in the Far East. Now, so that there's nothing to discourage Washington from exercising this doctrine. The first thing that's happened was the Iranian defeat of the American and Israeli attack. This is the first real defeat that the United States and Israel have suffered. They were defeated. American bases in the Persian Gulf were destroyed in whole or part. The United States had to take its 50,000 troops and hide them in hotels and cities. And Egypt had to ask for Israel had to ask for a ceasefire. Iran did not ask for the ceasefire. Israel and Trump asked for the ceasefire. I think it was a mistake for Iran to agree. They had won the war and they should have finished winning. that would have broken both hegemonies. But the Iranians, for some reason, made a strategic blunder and called off their victory. So the lesson didn't really get delivered. Now, if we look at Trump's behavior, we don't see any sign of giving up the American doctrine of hegemony. He goes into Venezuela and kidnaps the president and his wife and carries him off. He says he's going to take Greenland from Denmark. He says he's going to invade Cuba. So the assertion of American hegemony is rising. It's going up. And also the assertion of Israeli hegemony. They are again attacking Lebanon. They are currently in the process of occupying Gaza, incorporating Gaza into Israel. You see, Trump's peace board, his Gaza peace board, this is a disguise for Israel incorporating Gaza into Israel. So Palestine is disappearing. The few settlements left in the West Bank are being overrun by the Israeli settlers. So the West Bank is disappearing along with Gaza. So we see the hegemony proceeding. Until somebody acts and delivers a real defeat, this continues.
How about the situation in Ukraine? Can we say that the doctrine, the hegemony idea is prevailing there, or we are still wondering what is going to happen?
No, I think Trump has done nothing to confront Putin's terms.
It looks like Trump said that this is not United States war, and he went away from the conflict. At least it looks like this.
Well, Trump says lots of things, and the next day he says the opposite. Mm-hmm. But he went ahead and gave more weapons. And the Americans and the British are still doing the targeting information for the missiles and drones that are fired into Russia. And the war has expanded because the missiles and drones are now not only fired from Ukraine, but also are using the airspace of Poland and Finland and the Baltic countries. So the sources of attacks on Russia have multiplied. They're no longer limited to Ukraine. There's no, and you see Putin, his unwillingness to win the conflict has encouraged the United States and NATO and the EU to keep it going. And it's expanding. The war is expanding. Russia now gets hit deep inside the country. Schools with school children get attacked.
21.
Oil facilities, electrical facilities. The reports coming from Russia, like St. Petersburg, the internet is interrupted constantly. The GPS is interrupted. People can't make payments. Stores can't order supplies. And all of this is because of the constant attacks on Russia from these drones and missiles. So it is getting worse, and more Russians are experiencing the consequence of the conflict far from the battlefront. And this is because Putin is content to let a war go on that he could end in a couple of hours. And he does nothing to stop the ability of Ukraine and its Western supporters from continuing the war. So when he strikes Ukraine, it's tit for tat. Oh, they hit our school with the kids and kill the kids, so we'll attack Kiev. But it's not part of a war plan to bring the war to an end. It's just, oh, you slapped us, we're slapping you back. And I'm afraid that the Iranians are adopting this same stupid, ineffective process. Instead of using their advantage, their dominance, and taking the initiative, they play tit for tat. The Americans attack, and then they attack back. But it's not part of a plan to get the Americans defeated and out. So as long as the targets of American and Israeli hegemony are so passive,
yes, I see,
and make no effort to finish and defeat their enemies, you'll have to expect these hegemonies to continue, and they will grow in application.
We've mentioned United States, we've mentioned the war in Iran, we've mentioned even China, Ukraine, Russia, but we haven't said even a word about European Union. I'm wondering, let me see how I roll it, how Europe look like today from United States perspective, from your perspective. Can we say that they still doesn't know where it's heading, where Europe on the world map based on the processes that we have seen all over the world at the moment?
I don't know what the Europeans are thinking. Looking at the low quality of their leaders, my conclusion is they're not capable of thinking. And what you're seeing is NATO was about to fall apart, and the EU was about to fall apart, and so the leaders, who are not really leaders, the people occupying offices, they decided that war with Russia would create a threat, and they could use the Russian threat to hold the EU and NATO together. So I think that is what's going on in Europe. They say, they keep talking about they're preparing for war with Russia in 3 years. It used to be 4 years, but they reduced it to 3. Well, first of all, Europe can't go to war with Russia. They have no capability if Russia fights. I mean, if they conduct themselves like Putin has in Ukraine, yeah, anybody could go to war with them. You and I could go to war with them. But if they actually fight, then there's no chance of Europe being at war with Russia. They're so outmatched, weapons, capabilities. I mean, but I think it's a tactic or strategy to hold the EU together and to hold NATO together.
So they need an enemy, and Russia is the perfect enemy in order to keep them up together.
Right. Well, see, Russia's the perfect enemy because Putin made the strategic blunder of making Russia the enemy by letting the war go on. It's now in the 5th year. This tiny little conflict in Ukraine has now lasted longer than World War II. And therefore, he created 5 years for Europe to demonize Russia. Oh, after they get Ukraine, they're going to take Germany. They're going to take the Baltics back, Poland. And so they create concern, worry, maybe even fear. And so they've got the enemy, and now they're using that enemy to raise their military budgets from 2% of gross domestic product to 5%. That's a big increase. Mm-hmm. And so it makes money for the armament manufacturers. And of course, the politicians, they get kickbacks from giving the contracts. Which armaments manufacturer gets the contract? Well, who pays the biggest bribe? And so for the Europeans, it's a way of getting the European people and politics and the higher offices. It's a way they get to become multimillionaires. And so the war serves financial interest of the leaders, and it serves the general purpose of having an enemy that keeps Europe united. And that will continue. And I think Trump has simply said, okay, now it's your game. We've set it up for you. And I'm at war with Iran, and I'm trying to get out of that because there's nothing else I can do. And I want to go to war with Cuba. Mm-hmm. And so I'll need aircraft carriers from the Iranian area, and I'll need them off Cuba to help my invasion. And so what will happen, I think, to American participation in the Israeli war against Iran will be Trump will just, since he can't find out how to get out of it, and he knows he can't win, he'll just create a new war. He'll create the war in Cuba, and then that will shift all the news focus off of Iran to Cuba. And so Iran moves to the back burner of the stove, and then it moves off the stove. And that's how Trump will get out of the trap that Netanyahu got him in, telling him Iran would collapse in 3 days.
Unfortunately, it's something that we have seen a lot of times. It's not something new to wipe off one war, starting a new war. But we will continue on the next part of our interview with other war. Let's call it digital revolution, which is the war of the future. Уважаеми зрители, на 3 юни от 19 часа заповядайте тук на живо в студиото на Поглед. Гост ще ни бъде професор Дарина Григорова. Оказа се, до момента не съм правил интервю с нея, но темите са ясни. Православието, славянството, историята, Русия и всичко това в контекста на днешните събития или по-точно на събитията от последните 4-5 години. Така че заповядайте на 3 юни от 19 часа. Билети може да си купите в ePayGo или на място преди началото на събитието.